The wreckage of the transport ship still smoldered when Darren Cole regained consciousness. His head throbbed, and the acrid smell of burnt circuitry filled his nostrils. Through blurred vision, he assessed his surroundings. Alien vegetation in shades of violet and crimson, twin suns burning overhead, and the twisted metal corpse of what had been his ride off this godforsaken planet. Darren pulled himself from the debris, checking his vitals. Bruised ribs, possible concussion, but alive. That was more than he could say for the pilot. He salvaged what he could from the wreckage: a plasma cutter, emergency rations, and his service rifle. The distress beacon was toast, which meant he was stuck on Velic 7 until the recovery team arrived. If they arrived, the planet was listed as uninhabited in the database, but databases were often wrong. Darren had learned that lesson the hard way during his 15 years with the Terran Expeditionary Forces. He set up a makeshift camp near a rock formation that offered some cover, and began rationing his supplies. 3 days' worth of food, maybe 4 if he stretched it. Water would be the real problem. On the second day, he heard it, a low, keening sound that raised the hairs on the back of his neck. Darren grabbed his rifle and moved toward the source, careful to stay downwind. What he found made him freeze. Caught in the twisted branches of what looked like a thorny shrub was a creature unlike anything in the xenobiology reports. It was roughly the size of a large dog, covered in midnight blue scales that shimmered with an iridescent quality. 6 legs ended in vicious claws, and its elongated snout housed rows of crystalline teeth that could probably shear through steel. But what caught Darren's attention were its eyes, intelligent, amber-colored, and currently filled with panic. The creature, which Darren would later learn was called a Velic Ripper in its juvenile stage, thrashed against the thorns that had ensnared its hind legs. Blood, surprisingly red, oozed from multiple puncture wounds. "Easy there," Darren muttered, knowing the animal couldn't understand him but hoping his tone would convey non-aggression. He'd dealt with enough hostile fauna across a dozen worlds to know that scared animals were unpredictable. The creature's head snapped toward him, lips curling back to reveal those crystalline fangs. A warning growl rumbled from its throat, deep enough to vibrate in Darren's chest. He should have walked away, should have left it to its fate. But something in those eyes reminded him of the stray dog he'd rescued as a kid back on Earth, before the wars, before everything went to hell. Darren set down his rifle and approached slowly, hands visible. The creature's growl intensified, but it couldn't move. Using his plasma cutter on the lowest setting, he carefully burned through the thorny branches, working methodically despite the creature's protests. When the last branch fell away, the animal scrambled back, favoring its injured legs. For a moment, they stared at each other. Then the creature limped away into the underbrush, leaving a trail of blood behind. Darren returned to camp, thinking that would be the end of it. He was wrong. The next morning, he found the creature at the edge of his campsite, lying near the rocks. It watched him with those amber eyes, but made no aggressive moves. Darren noticed it hadn't gone far on its injured legs. Probably couldn't hunt effectively either. Against his better judgment, he tossed it one of his ration bars. The creature sniffed it suspiciously, then devoured it in 3 bites. Darren named it Cur, after an old Terran word for spirit because of how it seemed to appear and disappear like a ghost. Over the next few days, an unusual routine developed. Cur would appear at dawn, accept food, and watch Darren from a cautious distance. The cub's wounds healed with remarkable speed, but it showed no signs of leaving. Darren found himself talking to it, filling the silence with stories of Earth, of battles fought and comrades lost. On the 5th day, Cur brought him something. A long, curved bone, probably from some unfortunate creature that had crossed the young predator's path. It was clearly a prized possession, as Cur had been gnawing on it obsessively. Darren examined the bone with curiosity, turning it over in his hands. That's when Cur did something unexpected. It snarled. Not the warning growl from their first encounter, but a genuine, possessive snarl that conveyed one clear message. Mine. Something primal awakened in Darren Cole, something that reached back through millennia of human evolution, back to when his ancestors had competed with saber-toothed cats and dire wolves for survival. He locked eyes with Cur, and from deep in his chest he produced a growl that would have made any apex predator proud. It was guttural, raw, and carried the weight of a species that had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain through sheer stubbornness and refusal to submit. The effect was instantaneous. Cur's ears flattened against its skull. Its body language shifted from aggressive to submissive in a heartbeat. And then, To Darren's amazement, the young predator rolled onto its back, exposing its vulnerable underbelly in the universal gesture of surrender. Darren stood there, bone still in hand, as understanding dawned. Cur wasn't just some animal. It was intelligent enough to recognize dominance, to understand pack hierarchy. And somehow, through a simple growl, Darren had communicated in a language older than words. He handed the bone back to Cur, who took it gently and retreated a few paces before resuming its gnawing, but this time closer to Darren than ever before. When the rescue team finally arrived 3 days later, they found Darren Cole sitting calmly by his camp with a juvenile Velic Ripper curled at his feet. The xenobiologists were astounded. Velic Rippers were listed as untamable, highly aggressive apex predators even in their juvenile stage. "How did you manage this?" the lead scientist asked, staring at Cur, who watched the newcomers with suspicious eyes but made no move to attack. Darren scratched behind Cur's ear ridge, earning a contented rumble. "Sometimes," he said with a slight smile, "you just have to speak their language. And sometimes that language is older than civilization itself." As they prepared to leave Velic 7, Darren made it clear, Cur was coming with him. The brass could file whatever paperwork they wanted. Some bonds, once formed, weren't meant to be broken. And if humanity's greatest strength was its ability to turn enemies into allies and predators into companions, then Darren Cole was going to make damn sure that tradition continued, one growl at a time.